Hi everyone, my name is Nick, and today we're going to go over what I would consider to be the best houseplants to give as gifts. This video is kind of specifically for people who want to give a plant as a gift to a friend or family member who maybe isn't that into houseplants or just has a couple of them and they're just at the beginning of their journey. And I specifically picked these plants because they are easy enough to grow, they're rewarding enough to grow, and they're enticing enough that your friend or a family member might want to bring a couple more plants into your home after you give them their gift. So we're not talking about any of your standard grocery store orchids or anthuriums today. We're getting a little bit more interesting than that, I would say. And if you're buying for a houseplant enthusiast, I would say just ask them what's on their wish list because I'm sure they have one. Anyway, I want to get started with the one that I would always recommend for anybody who would come into the plant store when I used to work there. So this was always my go-to as a recommendation. This is the ZZ plant, and of course this is a very common houseplant, but this is very common for very good reason. It's a ridiculously easy houseplant to grow. I think it's also pretty interesting too as far as low light plants go. So this is like the lowest light plant that I would always recommend at the plant store. So if anybody was buying a plant for like a basement or an office cubicle or anything like that, you could practically put this in the closet. You could put this in the bathroom with no windows. So if somebody has a bathroom with no windows and they want to green it up, this is a perfect gift. And the secret to caring to this plant when it is in those conditions is to water it when you pay your rent. Usually I would expect somebody who wasn't that into houseplants to just kind of put a houseplant in an obsolete corner of their home, not really realizing that it needs to go in a window. And that's why I always would recommend ZZ plants, because they don't need to go in a window whatsoever, and they probably would get kind of yellow and chlorotic. So like I said, it's a low light plant. It requires minimal attention, but it does grow. Like, I think it's rewarding enough, I'd say. I know some people bring these in their home and they don't do anything at all, but I don't know. I've had this one growing on my built-in shelves in my home, which I don't think have ever seen the light of day of YouTube because it's literally in our hallway that receives no sunlight at all. So this is the only plant that lives on that shelf. And it even has, you can see a little bit of a nub of new growth coming in here. I don't know how well I'm showing that on camera, but this has definitely put off at least one or two fronds since I brought it home. So it's done enough for me. It's rewarding enough, but it's incredibly easy. So I would have to recommend this first and foremost for anybody who wants to buy a gift for somebody, because I think it looks nice enough. Like I said, it's not the most funky plant out there, but I think this is exactly what I would be looking for as a houseplant, as a gift, because I could literally put it wherever and I don't have to think about it. So I wouldn't feel bad, because I probably wouldn't kill it ever. The only way I would really kill it is to water it too much. And like I said, if you tell them to water it when they pay their rent, it's going to practically take care of itself. So ZZ plant, first and foremost, have to talk about this one today. Another plant that I think makes an incredible gift is, oh, this one's going to be a little difficult for me to grab. Okay, so this is a Sansevieria, or a type of snake plant. So this is Sansevieria cylindrica, Sansevieria cylindrica Boncel. Had to get it right. So this is what they call the starfish plant, or the starfish Sansevieria, the starfish snake plant. You can call it whatever you want, as long as it includes starfish. That's usually in the title. But this is an incredibly easy plant to grow. It's very rewarding. I think it's one that, very similar to the ZZ plant, really requires minimal attention. And obviously, it goes without saying, but this is an incredibly funky looking houseplant. This is definitely going to get heads turning for anybody who isn't really a houseplant enthusiast. And an even better thing about it is that if I was going to be giving this plant as a gift, I wouldn't even have to purchase one, because I have this plant right here that has 3 babies in the pot. So just like many other snake plants, this one is constantly producing offshoots, and as this is a little bit more of a structural, I don't know, architectural Sansevieria compared to the standard ones, where that would just kind of fill up a like fuller clump, this is just kind of separate plants that you can literally remove and plant up separately. But I kind of like the way it looks as a mess, but I think this plant really is shown off a little bit better as just one single plant, which is why it's a super easy one to give as a gift. I kind of prefer this plant being a single plant in the pot. I think it just really looks a little bit better, and you kind of get the fuller starfish experience of just one like starfish hand coming out of the pot. I think it's fantastic. This is a snake plant that I would specifically recommend growing in a windowsill. I would say, because of the way that these are like thick, you know, almost as thick as my thumb. Some of them really are as thick as my thumb, that they really do require a lot of sunlight. Some snake plants are known for being like lower light plants because they can withstand lower light, and they're, you know, those strappy leaves will just kind of grow in skinnier, but this would look kind of sad and sickly if this was, you know, growing in a very low light area, and then suddenly these thumb thick leaf thingies, I don't know how to describe them, would start to come in probably thinner than my pinky and it wouldn't look that good. So I would definitely recommend to anybody you're giving this as a gift to put it in a bright window. But besides that, they really wouldn't have to think about it. I'm probably watering this one like every 2 weeks maybe. I probably should be watering it a little bit more often than that since it's in a rather bright window. But I'd say if this is getting a weekly or bi-weekly watering, that it would be in good hands. So a really great plant. I think it looks fantastic. It's very easy to find. I usually had this in stock at the houseplant store where I was working, but sometimes because of how slow growing it is, it could cost like, you know, around 20 bucks for a 4-inch pot. So like I said, if you have one of these at home, you might as well check it to see if there's any babies in it if you're looking to give any houseplants as gifts, because this is a really funky one to give as a gift. And if you already have one in your home, you probably have one that you're able to spare and give as a gift. So definitely have to talk about that. All snake plants I think are great gifts, but specifically that one I think is the one that's going to get heads turning and be the most enticing to somebody who maybe isn't that into houseplants. And speaking of like the pups thing, you know how that the snake plant was producing those pups and you could give them as gifts. This is the Pilea peperomioides, and this is the plant that was like famous for being gifted. I believe one of the many common names of this houseplant is the friendship plant because of how easy it is to propagate and share. But this one, just like the Sansevieria Boncel, would produce more little pups out of the side of the pot. And this is just one single one I have here because this was actually a pup that was gifted to me last year, or traded to me. I can't remember exactly, but this would produce little babies just like the Sansevieria and become a nice full pot of Pilea peperomioides, and then I would be able to clip them out of the pot and root them up in some water. I actually think I have a couple babies rooting up in water right now from my other Pilea, and pot them up and give them to a friend as a gift. So I think it's the gift that keeps on giving, kind of just like the Sansevieria, but it grows a little bit faster, I would say, and produces pups a little bit more, you know, it's a little bit more fertile, I would say. But an excellent houseplant. I think it's super cute. This is one that I would usually have in stock at the store when I was working because it is such a great gift to give. And, you know, it used to be an incredibly popular houseplant, but these days, like I said, it's kind of just like dulled down as just an excellent houseplant to give as a gift. It's super funky. It looks neat with its round leaves. It's a great minimalist houseplant. So if you have any minimalist friends, I think it's a great plant to give as a gift there. Incredible houseplant. I'd say just make sure to put it in a windowsill. I find these don't perform away from window, at least in my own experience, but I have a lot of light in my home, and if I can't grow this thing away from a windowsill, I would love to hear your secrets of how you're doing it if you don't have it under a grow light. So yeah, a really cool houseplant, really funky, really easy to grow. If you are not watering this plant enough, it'll get kind of droopy and you'll kind of feel in the leaves that are very succulent that it'll kind of lose that succulence, which is great for somebody who maybe isn't that in the houseplant too, because you can just tell them to feel the leaves and to gently squeeze them, and they'll be able to tell when it's time to water if they don't want to stick their finger in the dirt, which is, you know, probably what they should be doing if they're a new plant person. But anyway, it's an easy plant to grow, rewarding enough to grow, specifically when it grows all these little babies, and it just feels like you've created something out of nothing. It's fantastic. So yeah, love this houseplant. It is popular for good reason, and it's super cute. So yeah, absolutely love it. And unfortunately, it is very inexpensive nowadays. When I first got my hands on Pilea peperomioides, I think it was like 30 bucks for a 4-inch pot, and I feel like that was probably before it even blew up. And now it's like $5 for a 4-inch pot. So we've come a long way. Hopefully other plants that are very trendy right now kind of follow that same direction. A very similar plant to the Pilea peperomioides is this right here. So this is a peperomia. This, obviously, the names are very similar because the Pilea peperomioides kind of looks very similar to this Peperomia argyreia right here. So it's kind of how the names kind of translate to each other. Anyway, this is the watermelon peperomia, and I think this is, out of all the peperomias, like the best one to give as a gift because it's like so novelty and it's easy enough to find. So I'd say, you know, 5 times out of 10 you walk into a houseplant store, they're gonna have these watermelon peperomias in stock, and they are stunning. I've been growing this one for a couple of years. I think I've had it for 2, maybe going on 3 years now, and it's performed very well for me. You can see how much character it has in the way it's kind of just like leaning over the edge of the pot. But I just am obsessed with the leaf shape. It's one that always stands out to me when I'm walking through my home, and it always just brings me so much joy. So this is one that I would say, out of all the plants I'm talking about today, is probably the most difficult because there are like things that you could do wrong because you overwater your peperomias and they're going to rot, which is just not enticing whatsoever. And they do require a little bit more sunlight, but Similar to the Pilea peperomioides, you can kind of feel in the leaves of this plant that this one, it's kind of succulent. I know that it's not going to need any water, but if it was very, very droopy feeling and, lacking all of that succulence, and I could just bend this leaf any which way without it snapping, I would know that it's time to water this plant. So this is a great plant to give to somebody who is maybe like, stepping into the houseplant world and they really want to try to learn more, about how to care for your plants. So I think this is a great learning lesson here, as long as it stays alive, but you give it enough light and you don't water it enough, or don't water it too much. More so, I think it's a great contender. But specifically, it is just like one of the most interesting houseplants visually, and it's so novelty, as I said. So I think it is such a good houseplant to give as a gift. Peperomia across the board are very inexpensive. I would be shocked if you find a peperomia in a 4-inch pot go for like more than $10, $12, maybe $15 maximum, since this is a more like popular, trendy peperomia at the moment. But I just think it's so cool. Inexpensive, easy to grow, rewarding. I've been growing this one for a couple of years. Oh, but the one thing I would say is to not repot it. I would keep it in its plastic pot. I've grown a couple of watermelon peperomias over the years, and I've lost all of the ones I've repotted, so I've decided to just kind of leave them be, because like my watermelon peperomias and my obtusifolias and my caparatas, all of those like more standard stemmy peperomias that grow up that center stem, I find that they just kind of do better when I leave them be in their plastic pot. I don't know what the deal is. I would expect them to do better in like terracotta or something, but yeah, I just leave them be. So that would be the one tip I have if you are wanting to help out your plant parent that you are gifting to. And let's talk about this next. So this is a rather popular plant at the moment. So these are Hoya, and I'm going to show you guys two today. So these are both very common types of Hoyas. These are two varieties that you would find pretty much at any houseplant store, and they are not going to burn a hole in your wallet. So this one is Hoya carnosa, and this one is a variety, the variegated variety that they call Hoya carnosa Crimson Queen. So it's got the white around the edges. It's a very easy one to grow. And then this one is Hoya pubicalyx. This is probably some type of Hoya pubicalyx, I'm just not sure of the variety. These are two of many varieties of Hoya that you'll probably find at a houseplant store, but these two are going to be on the lower end of the price spectrum. And there are so many things to love about Hoyas. There's a lot of reasons that people are collecting them, but they are pet friendly according to the ASPCA. They flower, they vine, they're trailing houseplants, but they will not encroach on your space. So it's a great plant for somebody who maybe is going to get into houseplants, but maybe you don't want to just like take over their house with like a vine or a long like trailing houseplant vine like a pothos. A pothos is a little bit of a rampant houseplant to give as a gift because it might take over somebody's space, unless they want their space taken over and they want their home to turn into a jungle. Then it's a fantastic gift. But this is one that somebody could put on like their kitchen counter near a window, and it wouldn't really do probably anything for the first year. Maybe they'd be lucky if it put off a few leaves, but this is one that like over a couple of years would really start to blossom into a beautiful houseplant. And then after a couple of years, it would start to bloom. They put up these beautiful clusters of flowers that they are known for. They call it porcelain flower. And I just think they're so incredible. So these are examples of ones that I've been growing in my home for probably about, this one I've had for about 3 years. This one I've had for probably about a year and a half. And you can see how they are very slow growing. So a different type of, if I had a pothos that I've had for 2 years, it would be at the floor, you know what I mean? From the ceiling to the floor. But these are much more, tame houseplants. It will encroach in your space much less. And they're very easy to grow. These are great for people who are a little bit more forgetful or perhaps hands off or just don't have the time to water their plants. Because I only find myself watering these plants probably like once a week, maybe like once every 10 days if it's in a little bit of a darker spot. But if I have this sitting near a window, I'm probably watering it once a week, but it could totally withstand a little bit more drought than that. But I just want to, be a good plant parent to my plants. But I think they're so cool. If you buy them 1 or 2, they might want to get 10 more. So yeah, they're kind of addicted to collect. But these ones in particular, like I was saying, cost a lot less because there's some Hoya out there where you would just take like one tiny little piece of it, like just, these 2 leaves right here, and they would sell online for like $100. But these ones are not worth their weight in gold, fortunately. But I think they are worth their weight in gold sentimentally because they are incredible houseplants. I love the pubicalyx specifically. This is one of my favorite types of Hoyas. I'm a huge fan of green plants that are visually undemanding, so this one fits me like a glove. But if your recipient is a little bit more into the showy and fancy, this is an excellent option, specifically because if you give it some more light, the leaves tend to turn pink, so that's fantastic. They do grow so slow. When they do start growing, it's just like so rewarding. And then they flower and you just kind of feel like over the moon. It's very exciting. Next, I want to talk about this. So this is a really funky one. So this is a Rhipsalis. So I really wanted to spotlight these today because I think they are extremely funky cacti, succulent-esque plants. They're epiphytic cacti, or jungle cactus is what they're referred to as. So I know that cacti and succulents are very popular. A lot of people want to grow like the barrel-shaped cacti and the very symmetrical echeverias. But I think those are a little bit difficult to grow in your home, specifically if you don't have like a crap ton of sunlight. If you don't have south-facing windows, you're probably not going to have as much luck as if you had south-facing windows. So I really love Rhipsalis because they are excellent lower light contenders for succulents and cacti. People want to put their cacti on like their coffee table and it's just going to rot, but Rhipsalis wouldn't do that. But these are super funky. When I purchased this one specifically, it didn't have this branch right here, it was just this. So it'd be a great one to sit on the table or, you know, on the kitchen counter near a window and kind of just be super funky. It looks like a cactus and succulent, but I think it's really out there compared to the ones you typically see. And then over time, they suddenly put off these just like, you know, things. This is just like how they start to trail. So this would, you know, eventually put off even more weight and then kind of like start to weigh itself down. And eventually the whole plant would start to do that. And then there'll just be like this trailing mess. So this is just a very young one that I have in my home, actually growing in a macrame wall hanger, just so that can just kind of like spill out. And I absolutely love the way it looks. But there are so many types of Rhipsalis. I mean, it's not like the most rich genus in species, but there are plenty of different looking ones. I have a bunch of them in my home, actually. I've been really into them lately, but this is another one that looks very different from this Rhipsalis, I believe pilocarpa I might have mentioned, but this is a Rhipsalis paradoxa. So this is one that's a little bit more popular on the market today. Doesn't really carry a hefty price tag. It used to, but nowadays I think it's pretty cheap. This was one I got for like $12. So yeah, a really excellent houseplant. It's really cool. You can see how funky it is. You can see how succulent it is. They have these little like cacti-like hairs on them, but typically Rhipsalis don't have like things that are gonna spike you, which I really appreciate because I cannot stand cacti spines, specifically because I worked around them so much. So yeah, I like to stay far away from those. So I kind of like these like pseudo spines that these plants have that are actually more just like fuzz. So I think it's really cool. But these are such easy houseplants. Like I said, they don't require the bright light of a window, so I have all of my Rhipsalis for the most part growing off of windows. I tend to keep them within like 5 or 6 feet maximum. I have a couple that I've pushed beyond that, but their foliage grows in a little bit skinnier. But these are ones that I'm growing in lower light areas of my home, and I think they're doing just fine, if not phenomenally. So, well, this one's barely done anything for me. But this one, as you can see right here, has this monster claw coming out here that I'm absolutely obsessed with. Very easy plants, though. They are very drought tolerant. They don't require that much water at all, I'd say. I probably water them like every 2 weeks, if I'm lucky, and I remember to water them. Very similar to the ZZ plant and the watermelon peperomia. I think really the only way you're going to find yourself killing these is if you are watering them too heavy in lower light settings and then they rot. So I think if you put this near a window and you just kind of water it weekly or bi-weekly, you're gonna have some really good luck with these plants. And over time, you're gonna have some really funky looking plants. These are often sold in the cacti and succulent selection. There's not usually going to be like a whole jungle cactus section, but if you rifle through your local plant store's cactus and succulent selection, you're probably gonna find a couple types of Rhipsalis. You might not find these, but they might look very similar and be stringy and have little fuzzy bits on them, or maybe they're just like weird green stick-like thingies that are just hiding out in your cactus and succulent selection. They're there. They're always there. I would always get them in my assorted mixtures, but they would never really be just like sold as Rhipsalis unless they're just like a cool plant store, you know what I mean? So yeah, but really cool plants, rather inexpensive, I would say, when you're buying them small. If you're buying the large hanging baskets that are like, you know, 2 feet, 3 feet long, they're gonna cost a lot of money because wholesale, they cost a lot of money. But anytime I was buying one in a 4-inch pot, it would always come assorted and it would be like dirt cheap. So I think that's a really nice little tip, you know, for your jungle cactus buying. Anyway, so this is a Staghorn Fern. This is the last one we're going to talk about today, and I really love this. I feel like I've been talking about these a lot lately, but I do think that they're very novelty, very similar to the watermelon peperomia. I always say this kind of looks like the vegan antlers, and I will say mine is bone dry. I really have to water it, so it's looking a little droopy. It's a little flaccid at the moment, but these are such cool houseplants. Once again, these are ones that are going to turn heads, and you can totally grow this in a pot, which is probably the better way to give somebody who isn't that in houseplants, so they don't have to nail a plant on their wall, specifically if it dies. But I think this is such an excellent fern to care for because not only is it very novelty and very interesting, but I think it's a lot easier to care for than most of the ferns I've grown in my home. Many other ferns are very like fragile. You forget to water them for a couple of days and they kind of just dry up and crisp up and look dead and annihilated. This is not one of those ferns. This fern, like I was saying, upon drought, it just kind of gets a little bit droopy. So if I watered this yesterday, it would be just a little bit more upright. It would be a little bit nicer looking, but I still think this gets the point across. But that's one of the reasons why I love this plant, because it's a fern that I'm not just going to kill when I forget about it, because I forget about my plants all the time. It's just, you know, I got a lot of them in my home, so I don't think about them all the time, but this is one that I think is very easy, and it's very versatile in the way that you can hang it on the wall. You can like make a kokedama, which is the moss ball, and hang it that way. You can just grow it in a regular pot, and I think it looks fantastic that way too. But I think just hanging this up on your wall is just like the vegan antler mount, and I think it looks so incredible. You're probably wondering how I water this. This is something I literally just take to the sink and I just spray this sphagnum moss is what it is with the hose nozzle on my sink, and I just let it sit in there and drip for like an hour until it's not dripping anymore, and hang it back up on my wall, and it kind of just takes care of itself that way. I'll have to, of course, water it after filming this video. But not only do these staghorn ferns produce these antler-like foliage, they also produce these, they call it a shield. It's like this round kind of just like base that will kind of adhere and attach itself to this moss. So if I successfully grow this plant for the next couple of years, these shields might start to envelop all of this moss here and then physically attach itself onto the wood, which is how it will grow in nature on trees. So I just think that's so neat and interesting. A super cool houseplant. I don't even know if I'm like holding it the right way anymore. I can't even tell. But yeah, it's super cool, super novelty. I think this is one that would really get people into houseplants if they're not into them yet. And it's definitely one that's eye-catching. It's a conversation starter. So I love them. I think they're so cool. I love ferns. I'm getting really into ferns lately. It's just such a nice vibe, specifically when they don't take up any of my surface space, because that's something I do not have a lot of in my home. But anyway, we're starting to ramble, so I'm gonna cut off this video here. The best houseplants to give as gifts. I know the holidays are coming up, but this video can really be, you know, for any planted gift you're trying to give for anybody throughout the year, because plants are excellent gifts to give, even just to make somebody happy and make their day. So thank you guys so much for joining me. If you don't already, follow me on Instagram at phillyfoliage, subscribe to my channel, and I will see you guys in my next video. Have a great day.